Tensions escalating on the Texas border. Dramatic new video shows a struggle between Border Patrol and migrants in El Paso.
The migrant crisis turning into a test of wills between the mayors of New York and Chicago.
According to local authorities, Texas and Louisiana dropping off nearly 400 migrants at New Jersey train stations this past weekend.
We have this international crisis that really requires federal intervention that local government is being asked to subsidize. Local government is not designed or built to handle such a crisis.
Definitely both a humanitarian crisis for the migrants that are arriving, and it is creating a fiscal crisis for the city.
I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City.
In recent years, there has been a huge surge of migrants in major cities across the United States. And this is a huge problem because it has had some terrible impacts on those cities, including economic impacts. But the question is, why does immigration pose a threat to the United States, and can it be dealt with? Let's see. Slowly, immigration in the United States has become a nightmare in many ways. One of which is the undesirable cultural transformation it has brought. Californians, for example, has raised an alarm on the immigration rate it records, saying that in the next few years, California will be demographically, culturally, and economically distinct from the rest of America. From the look of things, California has turned into an extension of foreign countries, and it won't be surprising if political power is seized by these foreigners within the next few years. Another problem created by large concentrations of immigrants in cities within the U.S. is unemployment. Immigrants are said to be pushing Native Americans out of the job market. Still another impact of competition from immigrants in inner cities is white flight. In the last half of the 1980s, for every 10 immigrants who arrived in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, or Houston, it was observed that 9 residents left for elsewhere. Although most economists agree that immigration leads to positive economic benefits for the nation as a whole,
the growth of all of our economy, everything that we do, is going to be boosted by $7 trillion more.
The impact of immigrants on affected states and cities in the U.S. is a subject of considerable controversy. Immigration, no doubt, has profound demographic, economic, and fiscal impact on America's largest central cities. In fact, more than half of all immigrants reside in just 7 cities: Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Miami, San Diego, Houston, and San Francisco. Immigrants have negatively affected the areas in which they relocate in a number of ways. First, low-skilled immigrants displace unskilled minority workers in central cities and depress wage rates in certain industries such as fast food restaurants, janitorial services, construction, and apparel. In this case, the victims of U.S. immigration policy are low-income inner-city residents, most notably Black. Because residents of large central cities, in particular, are significantly poorer than average-income U.S. households, job competition from immigration is widening the gap between the rich and the poor. Secondly, immigrants contribute to the decline of central cities by driving natives out. This was discovered by demographer William Frey of the University of Michigan, who found that interstate and inner-city migration of natives is heavily influenced by immigrant settlement patterns. Frey discovered that from 1985 to 1990, whites tended to migrate away from states and metropolitan areas with large inflows of international immigrants. He also detected the flight of poor Blacks from metropolitan areas with large international immigrant populations, suggesting that cities are becoming balkanized by the influx of international immigrants in recent decades. Also, international immigrants impose a fiscal burden on cities. In fact, several studies suggest that immigrants in high migration cities such as Los Angeles, Houston, and San Diego use more state and local services such as schools, hospitals, and roads than they contribute in state and local taxes. This is where Kermit Daniels' assessment on the impact of immigrants comes in. He examined the budgetary impacts of immigrants on 28 major U.S. cities and found that immigration places a disproportionate fiscal burden on some of the nation's largest urban areas. He also estimated that immigrants cost localities as much as $8.4 billion a year and advocates for a federal transfer of funds to these areas to compensate city governments for the cost of providing services to immigrants. While it is argued that the United States have historically absorbed and integrated new migrants with success, yet the challenges are beginning to seem overwhelming. More so, the challenges brought by the new border arrivals are due not only to the high numbers, but also the diversity of nationalities, the large share arriving as families, and the overwhelming number who seek asylum. Some new arrivals are entitled to some federal public benefits, and those lacking a family or social connection in the United States can still find a foothold in U.S. communities. Unlike in the past, when migrants arriving without authorization tended to avoid federal authorities, some new border entrants have already been processed by the government, so will be more likely to ask for government assistance. The challenge is most severe in New York City, which has a unique legal obligation to provide shelter to anyone who needs it. The city has struggled to house migrants while also handling the regular challenges of unhoused New Yorkers, and has turned to hotels, a cruise ship terminal, a former police academy building, and other locations. New York and other cities are also bearing the burden of paying for medical care, schooling, food, and other services. And although the full fiscal impacts of providing services to the newcomers are unknown, mayors and governors nationwide have cited high costs. New York City spent an estimated $1.7 billion on shelter, food, and other services for migrants through the end of July 2023. Chicago spent about $255.7 million between August 2022 and the end of 2023. Washington, D.C. spent $36.4 million on migrant services by August 2023 and expects the total to reach $55.8 million by October. Yet, the impacts are not just on city budgets. Massachusetts governor said the state was spending $45 million a month on migrant services as of August 2023.
In Healey's letter to the federal government yesterday, she stated that the crisis is currently costing the state $45 million per month on
These strained resources have prompted mayors and governors, many of which are Democrats, to join a chorus of criticism directed at the federal government to centrally handle the increased migrant arrivals. Interestingly, it appears that New York City has been the most affected by the immigration crisis. In fact, the city mayor, Mayor Eric Adams, claimed in stark terms that New York City was being destroyed by an influx of 110,000 asylum seekers from the southern border, adding that fixing the issue would be difficult. Let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City.
Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City.
Those were his exact words at the opening at a town hall-style gathering in Manhattan. Being a Democrat, Adams, the mayor, has clashed with leading members of his party as New York City has struggled to provide housing and services to the migrants. For a long time now, he has also gone on to criticize President Biden and Governor Kathy Hochul for failing to help the city handle the asylum seekers, while still pleading for additional funding and expedited work permits. While giving the speech in Manhattan, he pointed to new projections that the city's budget gap could grow to nearly $12 billion, the same amount that city officials estimated that the migrants could cost the city over 3 years. Every community in this city is going to be impacted. We have a $12 billion deficit that we're going to have to cut. Every service in this city is going to be impacted. All of us. This surge of migrants crossing the southern border has no doubt overwhelmed the city, with nearly 60,000 occupying beds in traditional city shelters and in more than 200 emergency sites, with tens of thousands of migrant children joining the schools in the city. This financial and logistical burden has caused the mayor to repeatedly press Mr. Biden for help, calling for a federal emergency and a national decompression strategy at the border. Although New York claims to be getting no support on the immigration crisis, Republican leaders have continued to send buses of migrants to New York and have increasingly used the mayor's criticism of President Biden as a talking point ahead of the 2024 presidential election, applauding him on his willingness to call out President Joe Biden and his administration for their absolute failure to secure the southern border. But the New York City mayor's argument has also increased the spark of immigrant advocacy groups and some Democrats who have called the mayor's stance toward migrants racist, and a dramatic departure for a city where Ellis Island served as a gateway to America for decades. Many voices have risen to say that the mayor's comments are dangerous and could lead to violence against immigrants. His comments could no doubt activate the natives in a negative way against their new neighbors, and some bodies like the Legal Aid Society and the Coalition of the Homeless have begun to argue that the immigrant community does some good for the city and that the mayor's comments sound like fringe politicians on the far right of the political spectrum and would only work to villainize people who fled unimaginable situations in their home countries. But does this cancel the fact that mass immigration is taking a toll on the fiscal and economic conditions of the U.S.? What do you think about this immigration crisis? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't. Where money matters, we'll see you on the next one.